in the United Kingdom in predictable fashion. One might say norm-busting fashion. Forgive us, William Barr. The president slammed London's mayor as a stone-cold loser as Air Force One touched down on British soil. The president also called Duchess Meghan Markle nasty, then denied it, even though there's actual audio of him saying it. He also weighed in on British politics, which past presidents have been careful not to do.
So the president and first lady will have a private lunch with Queen Elizabeth. Prince Harry will be there. Meghan Markle will not. That will be an interesting dynamic to watch. We'll bring you all of the key moments live. So this visit comes just as Theresa May is about to step down as leader of her party, beginning the process of resigning as prime minister. In Washington, as Congress comes back to work for a few days, there's a new CNN poll that shows support for impeachment is rising. Slowly, but rising. Joining us now to talk about all of this, Abby Phillips, CNN White House correspondent, Jeffrey Toobin, former federal prosecutor, and CNN chief legal analyst, and Bianca Golodriga, CNN contributor. Great to have all of you. Obviously, we'll break away for the live event as all of the pomp and circumstance begins. So, Jeffrey, the idea that right before he lands, he sends out this tweet of the mayor of London, insulting him. Now, by the way, no love lost between them because this was in response to a day before Mayor Khan, Sadiq Khan, saying it is so un-British to be rolling out the red carpet this week for a formal state visit for a president whose divisive behavior flies in the face of the ideals that America was founded on. That was in response to calling Meghan Markle nasty. So already there is a very public unpleasant tiff between, leaders and some of the royal family.
That is true. But, I'd like to focus just for a second on this nasty issue, not because it's terribly important what the president said about Meghan Markle, but the idea that the president would deny saying something that he's on audio tape saying is kind of a surreal 1984-like scenario, which even for President Trump is especially surreal and bizarre.
Let's play it. Let's play him saying
listen.
the word nasty out loud. Listen.
Yeah. She said she'd move to Canada if you got elected. Turned out she moved to Britain.
Well, that would be good. There are a lot of people moving here. So what can I say? No, I didn't know that she was nasty.
I didn't know that she was nasty. Nasty. He just said it out loud, the word nasty. The president then later wrote, I never called Meghan Markle nasty.
Made up by fake news media.
Right.
And I think fake news, it's so interesting. Fake news with the president has become kind of a tell. Like when he says, believe me, that is almost always a lie. And fake news is now becoming kind of a tell for things that are true. And that's a classic example.
The fake news media he's referring to is a British tabloid, The Sun, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, right? So he's now calling even his friend Rupert Murdoch's publication fake news.
By the way, he's also tweeting about how riveted he is by New Day this morning and talking about CNN's global reach.
Good morning, Mr. President.
Good morning. He's watching because he said that he couldn't find anything else because obviously CNN has so much global reach that that's all he can find while he's in London. And he's talking about, well, not exactly how grateful he is for it, but he's certainly riveted by
I will also say if the Attorney General, William Barr, is watching, and I keep harping on this, William Barr did an interview last week where he said, no, the president doesn't do norm busting. Don't get him on him for that. Well, honesty about a word like nasty, that's a norm, an institution, honesty. Another institution is you don't,
weigh in.
Well, I'm trying to think of a word that, the FCC wouldn't have a problem with. As you're landing in a foreign country, Abby, you don't typically levy harsh criticism on the mayor of the host city. Criticizing or degrading the leaders you're about to meet with in that country, that's an institution.
Absolutely. And we should be clear about what the president did versus what Sadiq Khan did. I think this ongoing feud between the two of them has been going on for quite some time. But Sadiq Khan was criticizing President Trump's politics. President Trump, upon landing in London, was criticizing Sadiq Khan's height. These are very different kinds of critiques. Yeah. And President Trump clearly sent that tweet just seconds before Air Force One touched down at the airport, knowing that it would cause an enormous firestorm, but taking the debate to a completely different place, going from whether or not President President Trump and Sadiq Khan agree on their politics to whether or not Sadiq Khan is a stone-cold loser who is as short or shorter than the New York Mayor Bill de Blasio. So this is actually the kind of thing that we are very much used to. And I was listening to some commentary on British television this morning, and I think that even here, I think people have settled into the fact that President Trump is likely to do this when he comes onto foreign soil. But this is not just President Trump reacting. He clearly did this with a great deal of intention, intending to set this kind of tone as he comes to London, knowing that he's facing a lot of blowback, protests, and just really turmoil around just the fact that he is going to be here for this week.
But it's not just the lack of diplomacy, Bianna. It's the norm busting is also that he's weighing in on British politics at this time of great turmoil. He's saying how supportive he is of Nigel Farage and of Boris Johnson. He's weighing in. I mean, just as they're trying to figure out who is going to lead the way forward through Brexit somehow, usually a president of the United States stays away from interfering in internal politics.
Especially when there is a political crisis going on in Britain that's been playing out for 2 years. This is now the second time the president has weighed in prior to meeting with the prime minister. Now, this prime minister obviously is a lame duck. She has a few days left. Friday is her last day in office. Last year, remember, when he met with her, he gave an interview with another British publication in which he endorsed Boris Johnson. So he seems to be following suit with a pattern that we've seen before. This is the president weighing in on Brexit, supporting Brexit. This is something he supported from the get-go, and he believes plays into what he supports here domestically as well in terms of politics.
You know, it's interesting. Max Foster said something in our last hour. We'll get Max back on in just a second. He's at Buckingham Palace. But the thing that might upset the president the most this morning is Max says the crowds are actually small. In comparison to past events he's been in. Now, that might be because of a lot of things, but one of the reasons might be this sense of weariness at this point. The British public maybe has just had it with this in the controversy, Jeffrey.
Well, the good news is if the crowds are small, he can always lie that they're big, because that's his approach to inconvenient facts. The question I always have about the president's statements these days is how much do we discount them for saying, oh, well, that's just the president. And now people around the world are discounting him that way. The question is, what does it mean when the president's word means so little?
And when it's
I don't know the answer to that.
And it's happening on foreign soil with a country that's having an existential crisis. Great Britain, as we know it, could very well change over